Dear fellow students, colleagues, and friends, on behalf of the State Key Laboratory of Marine Pollution and Department of Chemistry of City University of Hong Kong, I would like to give my warm welcome to all of you for joining this distinguished lecture. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce our distinguished speaker, Professor Ming Hung Wong. Professor Wong is a research chair professor in environmental science at the Education University of Hong Kong, Tianjiang chair professor in China, and a member of European Academy of Science and Arts. As a leading authority in chemical pollution, the United Nations appointed him as the expert panel member of the chemicals management issues for the world for the UN Environment Programme. Amazingly, he has accomplished 3 doctoral degrees in the UK, including his PhD degree and 2 Doctor of Science degrees from Durham University. According to the Web of Science, Professor Wong has published over 750 journal articles so far. He has been a highly cited scientist for many years and is currently ranked number 6 under environmental sciences in the world. Owing to his achievements in environmental science, he received many awards, including the Culture Senior Fellow in 1997, Fellow of the Society of Environmental Geochemistry and Health in 2018, and the Royal Society Visiting Fellow in 2000. Professor is a highly productive scholar and is very gifted in scientific writing. A month ago, I kissed his arm and asked him to share his experience and tips on how to write good scientific papers with all of us, especially postgraduate students and postdocs. And then I was a bit surprised after he drank a few glasses of wine. He was so happy and to say, yes, Kenny, I will come. So thank you very much, Professor Wong. I hope you will learn a great deal from his talk today, and most importantly, share his passion in scientific research and communication. Please join me. Welcome, Professor Wong, please.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Oh. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay. First of all, I want to thank Professor Kenny Lam for the invitation. And I really feel honored to be here to give this talk. I also want to thank all my ex-students who worked with me, all the PhD students, postdoc fellows, and my collaborators. I really want to thank them. Now, this talk targets final year students, postgraduate students, and young scholars who have started their careers. I feel quite embarrassed talking about this in front of all these seasoned researchers like Professor Lam and Professor Chiu sitting there. I feel embarrassed. Like playing my street fighting skills in front of these Kung Fu masters. Okay, I feel very embarrassed. So my intention of this talk is not to show off how good I am, but I want to share with you my experience, especially the mistakes I made in the past, so you don't have to repeat my mistakes again. So I will talk for about 45 minutes, and then we will We will exchange information. If you want to ask me any questions, I think we will leave about 15, 20 minutes or even more. Okay. Oops. Need some help. Oh, this one. Okay, now this is the table of content. I will briefly talk about different parts of a paper, their purpose and how to write them. I'm sure you got the idea, but I just want to highlight some major issues. And then choosing journals. I think everybody has this question. I've written a paper, which journal should I try? And then I'll give you some idea about the reviewing process when your paper has been submitted, what happened then, and so on. And then finally, I think this is important. We should talk about some ethical issues, especially for young scholars. Now, I have given this talk in different places, in different countries, including Russia, Vietnam. I talked about the same thing 3 days ago in Vietnam, and I enjoyed it very much. So when you talk about an article, basically it could be divided into abstract, introduction, methods, results, discussion, and literature cited. And there are different journals, so you have to consult the guidelines. Some of them would like you to have separate sections on results and discussion, and some journals would like you to combine the two, and so on. There are some key points for writing the paper. The introduction should be strong. You need to engage the reader. You need to set the scene, explain why your work is important, and you have to state the major aim and objectives of your study. Now, for the methods, they should be clear and organized logically, and they should be complete. So you need to provide all the enough information so that other people could follow, could assess your results, or even repeat your experiments if they want to. Now, for the results, it should be clear and concise. You should avoid repetition between the text, the tables, and the figures. There are people who try to impress the readers by providing a lot of results in tables as well in figures. I don't think we should do that. For discussion, I think it should be relevant. All the discussion should be relevant to your own studies, the results you obtained. You have to answer, were the aims achieved? You have to go back to your aims and objectives. And then you need to discuss the significance and implication of the results you obtained. Now, we'll go to the title. There are different types of title. The first one, indicative titles. Usually it indicates the subject matter of that paper. It gives no indication of any results obtained or any conclusion you drawn. So an example is given here. The effectiveness of bed nets in controlling mosquitoes at different seasons of the year. So you use bed nets for controlling mosquitoes. We don't use that much in Hong Kong now. I still remember when I was young, we went to field trips and so on. We used mosquito nets. Now the second one, informative titles. it gives you more information. For example, the bed nets control mosquitoes most effectively when used in the rainy season. Rainy season, you use bed nets and it's more effective. Number three, the third one, question type of titles. When are bed nets most effective when used to control mosquitoes? Right? A question mark at the end of that sentence. And then the fourth one, main subtitles, kind of serious papers. But most of the editors nowadays, they don't like this sort of serious papers because they will think, well, if I accept the first paper, there's an obligation. I'll keep on accepting other papers in the series. So something for you to think about. Now, having a good title is important. I'm trying to list some of my papers which have higher citations. And then I realized there seems to be simple titles, 1 or 2 lines. Don't make a long title, and then try to put down some catchy phrases or catchy words, some keywords. The first one, export of toxic chemicals, a review of the case of uncontrolled e-waste recycling. We had a medium-sized project looking at the electronic waste about 15 years ago, and we were one of the early groups doing that. So electronic waste, the papers, we seem to have higher citations. So some other examples, like the third one, biofertilizer, which is a catchy keyword, ecological restoration, the fourth one, and so on. However, if you look at the fifth one, we were trying to make a sexy title, a title, shark fin, a symbol of wealth and good fortune, because in Chinese culture, we usually treat our guests the best and expensive cuisine. So shark fins. So the title said that shark fin is a symbol of wealth and good fortune, may impose health risk, the case of mercury, because sharks being the top carnivores, so all this biomagnification, ending up, these sharks contain very high concentration of mercury. However, the citation is very low, only 25. So we try to comfort ourselves saying, well, maybe not too many people in the world are working on this. So that's why we have low citation. Recently, I talked to Professor Leung just now. We spent a bit more time on writing reviews. Now, reviews normally attract more citations. So the past few years, we have been looking at different possibilities, writing reviews. For example, the first one, bisphenol A in China. Second one, electronic waste management. The third one, pharmaceutical, personal care products. And it seems that they're doing quite well in terms of attracting citations. So the past few years, because I'm sort of semi-retired, I'm not able to serve as principal supervisor for any more PhD students. So we spend a bit more time on writing review papers. So quite a few. So these are some examples, but we don't know the citations yet. Now, I'm trying to talk a bit about the question whether the review papers will attract more citations. So I'm using one journal which I served as the editor-in-chief for 20 years. So I'm more familiar with this journal. Now, this journal, it has become a popular journal. The impact factor is not that high. It's 4.898, 2021. So it climbed up slowly, but somehow it has become very popular. A lot of people coming in. And in terms of water resources, it ranked Q1. Also public, environmental, and occupational health, also Q1. Now, what I'm trying to show you is the data I got from this journal. Try to compare the average number of citation to the article types. The first one, all the articles. The second one, reviews articles. The third one, conference paper or special issues. So you can clearly see that the reviews tend to attract a bit more citations. This is an example, and I'm sure other journals would have the same sort of results. Okay, so we talk about keywords. Usually when you submit a paper, after the abstract, you have to submit 3 to 5 keywords. Now, certain journals would ask you not to repeat the words which are already in the title. Okay, so the keywords should reflect the contents of the paper. The major purpose of these keywords would be enable the readers to check your paper. Okay, so one example here, I'm not going to talk about 2 examples. One example, variation in arsenic, lead and zinc tolerance, and accumulation in 6 population of terrace potato from China. So in the keywords, we try to avoid the words already appeared in the title. We put down Chinese brick fern, which is the common name for this particular fern, which is a arsenic hyperaccumulator. We also put down Terrace semipinnata, which is another species in the same genus. We want to compare the 2. And then heavy metal tolerance, accumulation, and intra-specific variation. So we are talking about the comparison of these 2 species. Now, highlights indicate significant findings you obtain. I think journals nowadays, they need you to write down some highlights. So normally, you look at your paper and then try to come up with some highlights. Well, what are the significant findings you have? Authorship. I think the authors should contribute to be qualified as a co-author. I don't think it's a good idea if you want to please your boyfriend or girlfriend, putting the name as an author, especially if you are broken up later on, and then you have more argument. So for a qualified author, I think he or she should contribute to design, exercise, analysis, and writing of the papers. So in the old days, all the authors will be listed according to the alphabetical orders of the surname. So Wong would be very last. Zhang would be even worse. Zhang, Z-H-A-N-G. But nowadays, we tend to change the tradition. Usually, we give the first offer to our PhD students who has carried out the work under the supervision of his or her supervisor. So usually supervisors will serve as a correspondence author. Now, for one thing I need to mention, when you publish your first paper, you should think about the name you list for all the papers the rest of your life. I made a mistake here. I use different style of my name. Ming Hung Wong, Ming Hung Wong, Ming Hung Wong together, or MH Wong. So people will find it difficult to see whether you are the same person. So you need to think about when you publish your first paper, you use the same style throughout your career. Now, recently, there are certain journals would like you to list type of contribution of each author. Okay, so which author is getting the grant, writing the paper, editing the paper, and now analyzing the data and so on. Okay, abstract. Now, abstract should answer 3 questions. Why did you study it? How did you study it? And what did you find? And what does it mean? So you need to answer all these 3 questions in the abstract. Now, the abstract is only a small paragraph, 250 words, 300 words. For example, environmental pollution, they only allow you 250 words. If you have 251, they will send the manuscript back to you. Can you cut down 1 word? Okay, so study the guideline. So basically, you need to answer these questions. So the basic content, this small paragraph, we can regard it as a mini paper, a skeleton of your full paper. So to start with, you should state the principal objective and the scope of your investigation. You need to describe the methodology you use, and then summarize the major trends of the results. And then finally, 1 or 2 sentences, you need to talk about the principal conclusions based on the data you obtained. So this is an example, a paper we published back in 2008. The first author, Anna Leung, I'm sure some of you may know Anna Leung. She usually turns out quality papers. Anna is a very steady worker, quiet, but sometimes slow, but usually she turns out good quality paper. So this particular one is about electronic waste. We mentioned earlier on about the extracting precious metals in the electronic waste, the metals like gold, silver, and platinum using primitive techniques. So in the end, you tend to generate a lot of pollution problems. So if you look at the abstract, if you dissect the abstract, you will find different sentences answer the questions we talk about. Why, what did you do, what were the results, and so on. And then conclusion, future prospect or application of your results. Now, we talk about one type of abstract. There's another type of abstract which has become a bit more popular recently. So this is a kind of extended abstract. They would require you to write 1 or 2 sentences in each of the following categories or sections, if you like. Introduction, giving people a bit more background. The methods, a bit longer than only 1 or 2 sentences. Major trends and results. and then conclusion. I think this is maybe some of you would like this sort of abstract because you can easily put different sentences under different categories. Graphical abstract is becoming popular. I'm not an expert on doing this, but fortunately, there are software for doing this sort of graphic abstract. Now, my own guideline, try not to put too many words in the graphical abstract. Introduction. Now, introduction would provide all the necessary background information to put your work into context. So it should be clear from the introduction, why was the current work performed, the aims and significance, what has been done before. You need to do a bit of literature review and identify the data gap. And then you need to explain why does your paper add to knowledge. You need to write something, why doing your work will be beneficial to the scientific world. So don't put down the reason I'm doing this because my supervisor asked me to do. I still recall a little story, PhD examination in England, the external examiner asked the candidate, the PhD candidate, why did you collect these samples from these sites? What are the reasons? And then he said, well, we collected those samples because my supervisor went there for holiday and he met some of his friends. So it's really bad. So be very careful. So for writing introduction, I'll give you some simple guidelines. There are things you should do and things you should not do. So the first one, you should consult the guide for authors. Okay, there are different journals, they have different guidelines. So you need to look at those guidelines and then set the scene and outline the problem you're going to solve, and also any hypothesis you're trying to include. Ensure that the literature cited is balanced, up to date, and relevant. This is very important. And then define any non-standard abbreviations and jargon. So later on, you can use abbreviations. So things you should not do. You should not write an extensive review. Well, unless it's a review paper, okay? You should not cite too much of your own work or your colleagues' work, or work that supports your findings, and ignore those contradictory studies or work by your competitors. So in other words, you should have a balanced kind of citation. In the introduction, you don't have to describe the methods, results, or conclusion in detail, well, other than to outline what was done and achieved in the final paragraph. Okay, so don't mix up the contents. Experimental procedures, materials and methods. You have to describe how, when, where, what you did. So you give details, the competent worker can repeat your experiments. So you need to state all the controls, all the treatments, replicates you used, and so on. well, we need to do a lot of chemical analysis. So we need to provide the QA, QC, and also the standard reference materials, the name of the standard reference materials, the code number, which is important, and where did you obtain these materials, and also blanks and so on. Now, whenever you mention hazardous materials and dangerous methods, I think it would be good to include a sentence or two about your precaution. You will carry out the experiments inside the film hood, or you're wearing some protective equipment and so on. Now, if the experiments dealt with animals with a backbone, so animals like fish, well, obviously human beings, you need the approval by ethical committee. I think each university nowadays, they have their own ethical committee. Now, for experiments dealing with living organisms, I'm sure some of you are working on different organisms. I think you should provide the common name and Latin name. Latin name, usually you have a genus name and a species name. And very often you need to talk about the strains, the subspecies, cultivars, and so on. The characteristics, the age, the source of your organisms, the growth conditions you provided, the feeds you try to provide them, you need to write them down. For ecological experiments, I think it would be good to have a map or a photograph to show all the sampling locations. For plant trials, I'm not so sure whether you do plant trials or marine biology kind of experiments, but you need to talk about the greenhouse trial, the random block design, the environmental conditions like temperature, relative humidity, light dark cycle, the fertilizer you provide the plants, the growth substrates, and so on. And it will be the same for animals. If you grow some rabbits or mice, you need to talk about all these conditions. Okay. For published methods, I don't think it's necessary to write down the detailed procedures. You need to cite the original person who devised the method. I think that would be sufficient. Well, unless you have modified the method, then you need to talk about which parts you have modified, and you have to provide more details of all these modified procedures. For new methods, obviously, you need to talk about detailed methods. I still remember some years ago, back at Hong Kong BU, I served as a co-supervisor. The principal supervisor was Professor Chai Zhongwei, who also had another state key lab. And the student was trying to develop a method. So she is a girl. She need to give more information, detailed information about this method she tried to develop. By the way, she's doing very well in Shenzhen, this particular student. And then you need to precisely describe the measurements and analysis. You use statistical methods, and then you need to talk about mean, standard deviation, level of significance, and so on. Nowadays, you are so lucky. When you do your statistical analysis, there are different packages waiting for you to use. When I did my PhD in the 70s, we only relied on a simple calculator. We're trying to to work out the t-test, the correlation coefficient, usually take you the whole day to do one particular exercise. And then in the end, the answers are different. So you have to repeat and repeat again. Now, results. Results will be very important because the entire paper stands on this results section. So it would be the shortest section, simple and direct. Usually we only include present data you obtain and try not to compare the data in other papers. No discussion if it's a separate result, and then avoid redundancy. As I mentioned, don't try to impress people. Try to give them more results in table forms, in figures, and then you talk about the results in the text. So the major idea, the major purpose of the results is to guide the reader and points out the trends and patterns of the results you obtain. Another important function of the results, because they will support the conclusion. The conclusion would be drawn based on the results you obtain. So things you should do and things you should not do. So this one, you should use figures and tables to summarize the data. You should include enough statistical analysis to persuade the readers. Be sure the text, figures, and tables are consistent with one another. So normally, when I look at the results, and then sometimes, well, very often we find out the text describing the results seems to be deviated from the data the students provided in the tables of figures. So be very careful. Emphasize only important observations. Sometimes you may have to give up some less important results. So be selective about your results. Things you should not do. In the results section, you should not include discussion or introduction, well, unless it's truly essential. You should not repeat material that is already in the methods section, and then repeat the legends for figures of the table or the titles of the tables in the text. Again, not try to include the same data in the figures or tables. Now, most tables and figures are most effective in presenting your data, but one thing we have to bear in mind, neatness counts. So your tables should look tidy, simple. Your figures should look tidy, simple, and pretty. Using this same line drawings, the same kind of font and font size and so on. So you have to design your figures carefully and make them in the final size you want them in the published paper. So make sure all the figures are uniform, and then no unnecessary text in the figures. So don't put several sentences underneath the figures. The best, the good, I think it would be good. It would be good after you have the final draft of your table or your figure to show them to your friend, your colleagues, and see whether they understand. Now, if they don't understand, you have to sit back and then try to improve them. I think that would be a good idea. Some examples, I'm not going to go through them because I got this from other sources. Well, the major part of my talks are from other sources. So there are some good ones and some bad ones. I will leave you the PowerPoint so you may be able to look at them. Graphics software, again, you are very lucky, you have softwares doing that. I still remember in the old days, well, not that old, in 1980s, I think we still have to draw our own graphs. Fortunately, I think I was at the Chinese university as a young lecturer then, after my PhD. There was a section in the science faculty. There's a professional person who tries to who did that for us, but he's very busy, so you have to wait and wait and wait, and you have to be friendly with him in order to put your work a bit earlier. Now, discussion. Tell readers what results mean and why they are important. So the major purpose is to indicate the relationship among the facts you observe. You need to explain the results relative to your objectives you put down in the introduction. So now and then, when you're writing a result, you need to go back and look at the objectives you put down. The major idea is to answer, is there evidence in your data to support the hypothesis you tested? Why or why not? You have to go back to your hypothesis. Quote relevant references in the text would be important. Now, try to avoid all these old references because we are writing scientific papers. We are not writing historical papers. So try to avoid all those papers unless it's necessary. Certain methods, for example, protein contents, you need to cite the person who invented the method, maybe 1970s. Otherwise, you need to provide all the more updated references. Now, at the end of this discussion, usually there will be a concluding remark, a kind of concluding remark section. Certain journals may have a separate conclusion section. In the conclusion, you need to talk about the significance of your work based on the data you obtain, whether or not the data support or disapproves the hypothesis you try to test, and also suggestions for future studies. Acknowledgement. Okay, I need to speed up a little bit. Acknowledgement, you need to acknowledge the people who helped you, but one thing is important. You need to acknowledge the funding source. That's very important because usually after you obtain your grant, your supervisor will tell you, we need to produce some recognized output, papers and so on, and then you need to cite the funding source. References are important. Most of the students tend to neglect this part. We should try to avoid certain references, personal communications, papers written by the green groups. Usually they are a bit more biased. Outdated papers, as I mentioned, citing articles published only in the local language. So, well, 10 papers, maybe one published in Chinese may be okay, but don't put too many papers which are published in local language. Avoid self-citation. Luckily, nowadays there are softwares to help you, reference management software. Try to avoid making silly mistakes. Okay, so a few silly mistakes here. Bowling, sauna, guest, and barber shop. I'm trying to show you, once the editor or reviewers seeing these sort of silly mistakes, they will think the papers, the authors are not so serious. They will throw your papers away without spending more time. So proofreading is important. Nowadays, we are also lucky. Universities also provide some fund for English editing. Now, choosing journals, I'm sure your supervisors could give you more guidance, but usually we may want to work up from the top papers and then work it downwards, I think. But one thing we have to bear in mind when you choose the journal, you have to see whether the journal is peer-reviewed. Who is this journal's audience? What is the average time to print? Especially some of you may have pressure before graduation. You need to produce 1 or 2 papers and so on. What is the journal impact factor, which is very practical? Cover letter would be important. Usually, we don't write a long letter. I think my own guideline would be half a page the most. You tell the editors, the editor-in-chief about the significant findings of your paper, and then try to persuade them your papers would be suitable for this particular journal. Now, what editors look for in a manuscript? They look for quality, significance, and originality, and then which is consistent with the scope of the journal. Now, different journals have different scopes, so we need to look at the lengths of these journals, and then also demonstrate broad interest to the readership. Will it cite? Will it be a well-written story? And so on, because we are talking about business. All these journals, they want these papers have more citation and so on. Refereeing process, usually it all depends on the structure of journals. Some journals would have one single editor-in-chief. Some would have co-editor-in-chief, associate editors. Now, once you submitted your paper, the editors will look at the abstract. I should try to screen the abstract to see whether the science is up to standard, whether the paper is within the scope of the journal, and so on. And then the paper will be assigned to a handling editor or associate editor. The associate editor will use your keywords and try to find suitable reviewers based on the keywords, and then send out invitation. And then the reviewers look at the invitation, and then they try to find out whether they are interested to give the paper some comments within the time allocated. Sometimes you are asked to suggest reviewers. It doesn't mean that these suggestions, these reviewers will be used, but it would be useful, especially nowadays. We find it very difficult to find suitable reviewers. So very often we have to rely on the suggestions. So understanding reviews, what makes a good review? Good reviews would provide the editor with the information on which a decision can be based. So they tell the editor what is interesting about the paper, how the results are significant, what contribution the paper will make to the field, and what can be done to improve the paper. I think that's also important. So by looking at the comments, you will have a chance to improve your paper. If the paper is not accepted, you have to explain why. Recommendation and decision, I'm sure you know about all this. Reject without review, accept with minor, major revisions, reject after review, not suitable, but will be considered after major revisions. I think I will skip this, but I will leave you the PowerPoint so you don't lose anything. Sometimes you need to accept rejection and so on. And I will talk about the ethical issues briefly, few minutes, I promise. Now, there are a few ethical issues I think the younger generation should know. Improper use of human subjects and animals, we talk about. Improper author contribution, we also touch upon. Multiple submission, I think this would be very important. So some of you may under pressure, you need some publication, but do not submit the same paper to different journals at the same time. You'll get into trouble, especially the editors. Nowadays, we can easily find out the papers have been submitted to more than one journal. Redundant publication, some of the data have already been published in other paper. Data fabrication and falsification, and also plagiarism. I still recall the very bad experience I had some time ago. I need to investigate problem like this. So the first offer, the PhD student, got into trouble because of some of the problems we talked about. So eventually, his PhD was taken away, and I'm not so sure whether he or she, I don't want to disclose, lost his job. So be very careful, don't do all these, because eventually you will become well known in the scientific world, because the journal would publish something like this with your name on. This paper is retracted. So be very careful. Okay, I think I will stop now. Thank you very much.
Once again, thank you, Professor Wong, for this inspiring talk. Now I open the floor for questions. Those who online also can raise up your hand, or you can type in your questions in the chat box, and then our colleagues will read them out for you. So any question? So maybe I start with the first question.
Okay.
How can we deal with the rejected paper? I think this may be quite common experience we have.
Right, right. Okay, good question. I was trying to explain, but I didn't have too much time. I think you need to sit back, don't start crying, but you need to understand the messages you receive, why it was rejected. If you think it's not fair, well, sometimes you will find the comments are not fair. And then you can appeal. Write an appealing letter to the editor-in-chief. But whatever you do, you need to provide some solid background, solid foundation to argue why the decision is unfair. Now, most of the time, I think I did that a few times. I think I did that for about six times, and then I got successfully telling the editor saying it's unfair, and then they agreed. So you need to have to provide certain solid information. Now, sometimes if it's rejected because you don't have enough data and so on, you might have to do some more experiments. Then you need to think, do I have to spend a bit more time? Am I going to spend some more time? Or you want to modify the paper and then submit to a journal which is lower in ranking. I think you need to decide yourself.
Oh, very good answer. How about how to write a good review paper? You are so good at that with 1,000 citations each. So any tips for writing a good review paper?
Okay. Writing review papers, I think it's time consuming actually, but basically when you do your PhD, you need to write an introductory chapter. I think when you write your introductory chapter, you try to identify the data gap and so on. I think it would be a good opportunity if you extend it into a review. I think you ought to do that for your thesis anyway. So by doing that, you got all the basic information throughout the world, not only people doing the same thing in City University, in Hong Kong or in China, but you are trying to review all the information people are working all over the world. Then you produce a list, and then you look at the contents and try to compare the results. So in the end, you might have to synthesize the results, rewrite some we construct some figures according to these people's data, and then obviously compiling some tables and so on, and then do some real analysis. Don't just try to provide some description about all these people's paper. You need to really look at them and try to digest them and analyze them.
Digest them, analyze them. Very good recommendation. I saw some student knocking their head. Sunny, do you want to ask question?
I have question. When you do research, but you found a similar research have been published, how can you adjust yourself and your research?
What's it again?
She said that she is doing a research, but in the halfway she found a guy published already. Same idea.
Oh, okay.
What can you do?
Right. So that points out the importance. At the very beginning, you should do a thorough search. All the data, all the papers which have been published. So it's a problem, and then you might find out somebody published. I think that's difficult.
That's the life.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Well, I know what you mean.
Thank you.
Okay.
Our question.
Yeah.
Professor James.
So thank you for the excellent talk. I have a question about the productivity of our students. Some of them are highly productive, and some of them are not so highly productive. You have a lot of experience in supervising PhD students. Can you provide some tips as to how to increase the productivity?
Yeah, good questions. When I think about it, most of my postgraduate students were doing very well. I'm really lucky. I got students from different parts of China and one or two from other countries. I think they're doing very well. Now, one thing is important. I think you should make a kind of atmosphere that all the students can work together. So perhaps you encourage them to publish some common papers, to build up the number of publications, and yet they have their own specialties. And some would help in chemical analysis, some would help in other ways. I think it would be important to build up a sense of belonging of these students, take them out karaoke and so on.
Thank you. Team building is important.
Team building.
Any questions from postdocs? And from undergraduate students?
Undergraduate student. Good.
Dr. Chen at the back. Would you like to ask question or give comments? You can also feel free to share your own experience. Catherine.
Okay, thank you for your good speech. I just want to ask a question about the review writing. I have heard maybe sometimes the editors of the journal more likely to accept the review article from an experienced scholar. But for young scholars, maybe what do you think, or do you have any suggestions on the review articles from young scholars?
Adding Professor Wong's name.
Good question. But if you write your review, I think you would be teamed up with your supervisor. Well, normally, and he or she would be more experienced. I think you need to try this. But I agree with you. Certain journals would look at the authors, and if they think they are not they are junior authors, they might have this idea. Unfortunately, but talk with your supervisor and try to come up with a good review paper.
Okay, thank you.
Catherine, please.
Okay, thank you, Professor Wang, for the nice hearing. As you have 3 doctorate degree, may know if you have some suggestions for us about the topic selection or research topic selection.
It means how to select topic for
Yeah,
PhD
yeah.
study.
Because
Oh.
you have like 3 different.
You
Yeah,
graduated with
Uh,
doctoral
oh,
degrees. So you
okay.
want the
Okay,
maybe you can
okay.
share experience how to
Yeah.
select PhD topic.
Right. I need to explain a little bit. Now, PhD, you do a PhD. So I did mine, and then the other 2, they called them Doctor of Science. Now, in the British system or European system, Doctor of Science are sort of regarded as slightly higher degree, doctoral degree, based on publication. So for the 2 I got from Durham and Strathclyde, I need to produce the paper, the published papers in two different periods of time. And also I need to write some introduction, try to link them together, these papers together. So two separate degrees. But they are not so popular now. I think BSc, they're not so popular.
Then maybe her question is for a new PhD student, how to select a good topic for the thesis.
Okay, I think again you need to talk with your supervisor, try to define, try to come up with a title. It's general and yet it's specific, because a PhD thesis, you want your thesis to attract more citations and so on. I think you need to come up with a good title with your supervisor.
Okay, thank you.
So any questions? Yani, do you have questions?
Thank you very much for your presentation. My question is very likely similar with Tessie. I think come up with a good idea or a story is the first step of the research. So my question is, how can we come up with or find or identify an interesting and important research question? Yeah.
Very good question.
Yeah, very good question. I think if you have given a common theme when you come to do your PhD studies, I'm sure you know about your supervisor, the area he or she are working on. And well, because of that, you are interested to join the group, right? And you may be assigned with certain topic. You have to narrow down to certain topic you want to tackle. Before doing that, again, we need to search all the update references and look at all these references and identify some data gap. So there are some unsolved issues. People are still arguing about these issues. And then you may come up with some idea to form your own topic, the objectives, you put down your objectives, and then the experiments you're going to do to fulfill the objectives, and you put down some hypotheses and so on. I think you have to do it step by step with your supervisor's guidance.
And also read more paper. You have to make sure review.
Right.
Very important. So, Tammy, do you have any questions, or what have you learned in this talk? Tammy from Nigeria.
Nigeria, okay.
Thank you for the presentation. I just want to ask that in cases where you have an idea, you run the experiment, but you have not so good results. Are they publishable? And if they are publishable, how can we put them out there, even though the results are not so good and they didn't exactly meet our expectations? So in summary, what can happen is, can I publish results that doesn't match my expectation or hypothesis?
Okay, the question is, you got some results,
Yeah.
but they're not that good. So can we publish them?
Yes.
Right? Okay.
Like publishing a negative result, something opposite to my hypothesis.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I think you might consult your supervisor again, and you will talk to your supervisor whether you should publish your results now, or you want to do additional work to get more results and then try to submit them later on. And obviously, there are a wide range of journals nowadays. There are some open access journals, you pay money, and your paper you submitted will be published and so on. So you need to decide whether you want to publish your early results in a less prominent journals, or you want to generate more data, good data, and then publish them in higher ranking journals. I think you need to decide.
So very good answer. Any questions? We have one from online. Dr. Chen Jinping, you can speak loud, probably.
Thank you, Professor Lang, and thank you, Professor Wang, for such a nice talk. My question is, what is your opinion to the open access journals and traditional journals?
Okay.
Thank you.
Good question, actually. Can you hear me? Okay. Nowadays, there are more and more open access journals. I'm a bit suspicious of some of the journals. They claim the impact factor goes up within 2 or 3 years, and you have to pay a lot of money. About how much do you pay for each paper?
From 3,000 to 8,000.
Right.
US dollar.
And unfortunately, a few months ago, I received the news saying some major universities in the mainland, they put all these open access, well, some of these open access journals in a blacklist. So you need to think about it if you want to submit your paper to open access journal. Maybe I'm biased.
Need to check whether they're on the blacklist.
Right.
Good. Any questions? Dr. Liu Chen, do you want to share your views?
Yeah, Professor Wong, following Jinping's question. So the open access paper, you pay the money and they will publish. But usually they are high impact factor. So if the student want to publish in a high impact factor, they go to open access. So what is your view?
Do you have the money to pay to start with?
Yeah, so you have the money. But
Oh, you have the money to pay?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't really know. Lately, I've been working with my Russian partners. We have a joint project, and they submit a lot of papers into this open access journals. They seem to have enough funding and all that. I think this has become a controversial issue. I think we need to talk about this in a separate section.
Yeah, because the open access.
Yeah.
So the citation will be
Right.
better and more readers.
Yeah.
The second question is so you see there are many papers. There are now free co-first offer or very corresponding offers.
Right.
So what are your view on this kind of offership?
Right. Now, I see a lot of paper with two first offer equally co-first offer, correspondence offer, as you mentioned, not only one, maybe two, three, four correspondence offers. Now, certain journals would restrict the number of correspondence offer to one. Right? Well, two may be the most, if the two are from different institutes, if there are a collaboration with two and so on. Now, my own idea, I think we should not have too many correspondence offer. The Stanford University, they try to work out the citation impact also. They look at the number of offers. You have higher weighting for the first and the correspondence offer, and then less for the second, third, and fourth. Anything more than 4 or 5, the individual offer will have a lower weighting. So I think this is a difficult question, something I would like to know more about it and take part in discussion, really.
So, Tammy, it's a follow-up question.
Thank you. Thank you for your for review papers. If I decide to restrict my review to a particular number of years, if I want to review from, for example, 2010 to 2020, if I choose a number of years for my review paper, how many number of years is reasonable enough to create a review paper? 10 years, 20 years?
Yeah, good question.
Okay, good question. Now, to start with, I think you need to go back, maybe not to 100 years, I think, maybe a bit too long, but you need to look at, to answer one question first. Are there any review papers published? Same sort of topic. You need to identify if there are already review papers published. You need to study them, and you need to think about, would my own review paper add additional knowledge to the existing ones? Are there any niche, some niche you can work on, certain directions that the last review paper has not included? I think you have to do all this exercise and then decide the number of years would be less important, I think. Okay.
I think it also depends on the topic.
Yeah.
Now you can write a review on COVID pandemic impact, just 3 years.
Yeah.
But you will have millions paper to review.
Right.
So this is,
Right.
I think it's a subject.
Yeah.
dependent. So last chance. Yes, please, gentlemen.
Thank you, Professor Wong.
Thank you.
I have a question about writing up the session called implication. I know some journals are asking for independent session called the implication. So what's your suggestion on writing up the implication?
Implication.
Yes.
Just like the significance.
Oh,
of the study.
significance.
What is the implication? They have to write like a 50 words.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
like environmental implication or atmospheric implication.
Yes, yes. I think you need to look at your results and then you derive a few results which you think are important. So those results, they are novel, they are new, sort of new to the scientific world, and then you use those to write your implication, right? Significance of your study.
Okay, got it.
Based on your conclusion, yeah.
Right.
So any question? No? Is a new student.
New student.
You know, like, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Professor Wong. I was wondering, since you have got 3 different PhD degrees, if you have any suggestions about how to start a study, which is very different from your previous study, maybe a different era.
Mhm.
Maybe your master in your first degree in chemistry. Now she want to do rocket science, so.
Yes,
Or
maybe
ecology, yeah.
Okay.
do some work about environmental ecology, but it's about forest. But now I'm going to do some work about marine ecology. So I
Okay.
found it's very different.
Okay. I think we do not have all these disciplines. And then you will find they are different because scientific world, I think nowadays we need interdisciplinary research. It would be good to combine them together. Don't restrict yourself as a marine biologist or a environmental pollution scientist and so on. I think nowadays we tend to work in a team. The team members could be multidisciplinary team members like medical doctor, nurses, people who are good in statistics, chemical analysis. I think that's the fun if you react with all these people with disciplines rather than restrict yourself as a marine biologist.
Don't restrict yourself. Very good comment.
Thank you.
Okay, last chance,
Last
one
one.
more. Just last chance. Anyone want to ask a question? Sunny again to close the seminar or?
Good.
Yes, please. Yeah, you go. Yes, she would like to ask. Kalista.
Thank you for the talk. I have one question is, so if you if you don't have like a absolutely excellent result at our paper, should we go for a lower impact factor journal to have a higher chance to get accepted, or should we go for a more risky choice and just wait for the result? Because I know there would be a longer time if we get rejected, and then we might need to wait for a few months before I can publish to another journal.
Right. Yeah. I think it all depends on your own situation. Whether you are under pressure, you need to publish your results as soon as possible, or you have to you can afford to do some more extra experiments. You have obtained more results, so you can try better journals. But after saying that, I had some experience. The paper was rejected by a not too high ranking journal. And then I tried to improve it and then submit it to a higher journal and it got accepted. So there isn't any general rule. Sometimes it all depends on your luck. This is important.
on the lot, on the people who review your paper, whether these people are kind, whether these people are happy at that time, and how many reviewers you got, and so on. I still remember the time the paper submitted to EST. There were about 7 reviewers, 7 very top. 6 of them say yes. Okay. 1 said no. Your analytical method is questionable, and it was rejected by the editor. So I wrote a review, appeal letter saying it's unfair. 6 of them say yes, and 1 about the analytical method. And this method, we using the same method, we already published in another journal, a fairly respectable journal, and then eventually the editor-in-chief said yes, okay. So it's difficult to say. It all depends on your luck. Sometimes.
I like this posting. Wish everyone luck
Yeah.
in paper publication.
Right.
Please join me to thank Professor Wong.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. The last sentence. The last. Don't be afraid. Try hard. Whatever you have during the time you're not so happy, try to improve your paper and then submit again. You have to be very persistent. Well, fall in love with your research and try to publish your paper.
Yeah, very good. Persistent.
Persistent.
With research.
Thank you.
I also want to thank all the online people. We have a maximum of 100 people joining us online. Yeah,
Wow.
we still have 58 remaining to listen to our Q&A.
Okay.
So once again, thank you everyone for joining this distinguished lecture series. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you.